Hi everybody, my name's Tami and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm grateful to be here this evening. Heck, I'm grateful to be anywhere this evening sober, that's for sure, because it wasn't always the case. And I want you to know that Janie read her script well that I wrote about me for her to read. And it just goes to prove that just because you get sober doesn't mean you get smarter. As I'm driving with Alba telling her about the conference and alcoholism, and Alba made a quick U-turn back to the airport. So anyway. I know a lot of speakers sometimes say, oh, I do this all the time and I'm not nervous. And I'd be lying to say I look at the crowd here and it's nice to see that Alcoholics Anonymous is alive and well in Nashville, that's for sure. And it's not just in the crowd, but it's in the buzz in the room, and it's the buzzing in the elevator, and it's the energy and the little side conversations, and the other group of speakers all taking pot shots at each other, and Ms. Soon and I trying to be so ladylike about it. We know we could talk them and probably drink them all under the carpet, and all that good stuff, right? So it's all good. I want to start, of course, by thanking Jamie for picking us up at the airport, and that's a big commitment. She's a busy woman with all those things too, and yet to give up your whole weekend to pick up a complete stranger, and it sure feels good when you come into town and there's someone there to pick you up. My husband and I went to Canada one time, and he's Irish, and they wanted his green card and all that, and they said, well, where are you going? He said, I don't know. He said, well, who's picking you up? He said, Mike S. And they said... and they really gave him a hard time, and they were giving someone else a hard time too, and then he pulls out the little AA flyer, and the guy goes, oh yeah, go on through, so it's always nice to see somebody at the airport. I want to thank my friend Steve for asking me to come out and share. I want to thank the committee for agreeing to that. I certainly want to thank whoever made the basket or the little bag in our room, and it's really interesting because I'm like a total health food nut, and my husband is the dire opposite. And through the grace of God and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't try to change my men anymore. I learned the hard way, right? And so we're in there, and I'm pulling out those little cake pod things that I think Brian was talking about last night, these little chocolate potty things. And it's like chocolate Patrick, apple Tami, chocolate Patrick, banana Tami. And so there was a beautiful little gift bag waiting for us. And I want to thank Lee always again for his services to so many conferences that we've all attended. That's a big service. And I can't tell you how many people have walked up to me, and I know some of the other speakers, and said, I heard you when I was 1 year sober or something. And you know what? And these tapings are good because they get the word out to people sometimes that can't always make conferences. And by far, I want to thank the other speakers. Brian last night, he was hysterical. Where is Brian? Is he around here? He may be hard to see. Oh, there he is. Brian, I like you because I got a half an inch on you, buddy, and I get to wear heels. And Bud, our Al-Anon speaker, is he in the room tonight? Bud? Oh, he was terrific. Yeah, really good job. And certainly Carla and Don, who have been trudging buddies with me. Don used to live in Los Angeles, Carla does, and I've known them since day one of my sobriety. And I know those two, they share a great story and they speak all over the world, but they also do the deal, because I see them with newcomers and drunks in their cars, and they're the real deal, and it's an honor to be here with them. And they did a great workshop today. If you weren't here, please get the tape. It's not an easy subject to talk on, and they thought they did it with such dignity and decorum. I want to thank Jenny. I know Jenny. I spoke with her before, and she'll be your Al-Anon speaker tomorrow. My buddy Mike out there from the desert, he's also from California, and another one that was a mentor to me when I came in. And Danny, where's Danny? Is Danny here? Danny, yeah, Danny. My buddy Danny is here, and Masoon, my friend Masoon. And when I looked at the venue, I never look at the venue till I'm on the airplane, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Patrick, this is going to be a lot of fun. They're all good friends, and every one of them have been there for either me or my family, and that means a lot. I also just want to shout out quickly, 4 girls showed up and surprised me and drove a long, long way. They heard I was speaking, and I'm on the West Coast and they're over here. So a shout out to my friend Christina and Kat and little Gracie and Carol, and also to, there was some, Marion and her husband, they drove out, and it really means a lot to see familiar faces. So I have a sobriety date, it's 4/24/93, so I'm well into my 26th year of sobriety. I have a home group in Los Angeles. We're called the Pacific Group, and ironically, we are the largest weekly meeting in the world. We run about 600 to 800 every Wednesday. We have 80 people on our coffee crew. And our coffee crew gets there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the meeting ends somewhere between 9:30 and 10. And I do have a sponsor, and I believe personally, in my experience of the 25 years I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor has been the best walking example I've seen in Alcoholics Anonymous. His name's Clancy, and if he does not pick up a drink, he will be celebrating 60 years of sobriety this October, and I believe that I've kept good company. And finally, and most importantly, I want to thank my husband Patrick, who travels with me, and I didn't drink away a 21-year marriage. I'm like the only person I know that sobered away a 21-year marriage, because the same selfishness and self-centeredness that I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous with 25 years ago, sadly I brought well into my sobriety. And before I got sober, it was me and the police, me and child services, me and the courts, me in jail, me. And then when I became sober, it became me and my sobriety, me and my meetings, me and my recovery, me and going back to school, me and my job. And sadly to say, the same husband that I abandoned in drunkenness, I abandoned in sobriety. But through the grace of God and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and this fourth step, I was able to inventory the failure of a 21-year marriage. Now, my husband left me for another woman, and he's an Al-Anon, and he shares about that. And that's between him and his God. But my fourth step doesn't tell me what is my part. It says that I'm to inventory, where am I at fault? Where am I to blame for the failure of a 21-year marriage? And it's important for me to share that in the 12 years of my sobriety that we were married, I drank obviously quite a few years before I got sober. We were married a total of 21 years. I literally did not want to go back to that family. I had just broken so many bridges. I said to my sponsor, can't I just leave my husband and let him raise the kids, and I'll just meet some new guy in AA and ride off to the AA sunset, because I didn't want to go back and fix everything I broke. And I want you to know that it was a long road for us, and I truly fell in love with my husband after I got sober, and he really was number one in my heart. He really was, but it never translated into my actions. And I don't, because I was able to inventory that, I don't make the same mistakes with my current husband, Patrick. And when he speaks, I go with him, and when I speak, he comes with me, and we have like a little kitty at home, and we throw like 20s and $100 bills to buy the other person's airfare, and we do this deal together, because I don't want to leave another husband or kids at home anymore, and I learned the hard way, but at least I learned. I have been able, and you'll hear later in my story, to make amends to that husband whose only crime was he really did love me. And I didn't understand that kind of love. I just wasn't well enough, and it frightened me. And I'm able to give and receive love today, which has been such a great blessing in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know the price you paid for your seat here tonight in this room of Alcoholics Anonymous, but the price I paid for my seat here, or for any seat in any room of Alcoholics Anonymous, is I drank away my 5-year-old son named Alex, and I drank away my 6-year-old daughter named Chelsea. And I laid down my 2 little kids for the price of my drink. And I will never, ever be proud to share that. And I am not a talented enough speaker to be able to be funny. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for speakers who can take the tragedy of alcoholism and what we do and kind of put a little twist onto it. But I'm still so raw about what I did to my kids that I'm not that funny a speaker. So quite frankly, I don't mean to put a downer on the room, but I don't have a funny story. But through the grace of God and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been a sober mom to those kids for 25 years. And boy, I thank you for that. I'm described in the book Alcoholics Anonymous as an alcoholic that is never mildly intoxicated. I'm always more or less insanely drunk. So I'm like either sober or drunk. There's like no in between for me. I'm also described in AA vernacular. It is not spelled out in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, but in AA vernacular, I'm described as a puking blackout drinker. There has never been a time from the very first time that I picked up a drink at age 13 that I did not puke up alcohol. That's how hideously and physically allergic I am to it. I always offend some of you real good drinkers, but I have never liked the taste of alcohol. I drink solely for effect. Toward the end of my drinking, I used to have to plug my nose and uncap the vodka and guzzle it and just pray and like keep my nose plugged, because if I smelled the vodka before it stayed down long enough to heat up my chest and give me that light, goofy feeling in my head, I would retch and puke and gag it up before it took effect. Then I would just slowly release my fingers and pray that that vodka would hit here and then go straight up there. So I've never, ever liked the taste of vodka, and then I would always puke it up. I wish I could say I vomit. It's a little more feminine and demure, but I'm one of those, like, shoot chunks of food across the room type kind of puker. I'm hideously allergic to alcohol. I'm also described in AA vernacular as a blackout drinker, and again, because it's not spelled out word for word in the book, I can only describe my experience with it. But when I drink alcohol, I will go into lapses of memory where I will do strange and incredible things that I would be mortified to do in a sober state of mind, only again to feel the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization they talk about in this book the next day when people call me up and tell me what I'd done the night before. But I didn't understand any of this because I didn't know what an alcoholic was. I ran away from home at age 15, and this had absolutely nothing to do with my alcoholism. But the reason I share about it is many well-meaning, and I really want to reiterate, many well-meaning healthcare professionals led me to believe it did. I have been put in 3 foster homes prior to the age of 15 because of the illicit nature of the relationship my biological father had with my sister and I. Our stories disclose in a general way, so I don't need to go into graphic detail. But if you were a girl and you had a budding teenage body, you definitely were not safe to live at home with my dad. My dad would always be removed from the home, and my sister and I together would stay in a foster home until my mom and my dad would be in these programs, and then they would get us back. But when I was 15, my sister was 1 year older, she was 16, she ran away from home. And I was in school at the time, and I had a guidance counselor. And ironically, I'm a high school English teacher by profession today. And in Los Angeles, if you're a system kid, meaning you've been in and out of foster homes or in the system, all the other students, the general population, have what's called a manila folder, and we had an orange folder. We used to call it the pumpkin. And I was a pumpkin kid. I had an orange folder, so I had to meet with my guidance counselor once a week, as opposed to general ed populations that meet with their guidance counselor once a semester. And it's still the same. I'm an English teacher by profession today, and we have the pumpkin kids and the manila folder kids. So I was a pumpkin kid, and I was missing some school, and my guidance counselor called me in, and I was evasive, and she said I didn't make good eye contact. And so she got suspicious and kept me in her office while they sent child services out to our home. And see, Mom had run out of money like a couple months earlier, and Dad had come back around and was lurking around, and they found my dad. And so they decided one more time that I had to go now into yet another foster home while my dad was removed. However, this time I had to go for the first time without my sister, and I was really, really scared. You know, I found as an English teacher that kids escape painful childhoods in different ways. And for me, it was always through literature. I'm going to be honest with you. I have come to like the concept of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've come to love a few of you very deeply. But I am still like a little people shy, and I can honestly say now that people are no longer guilty until proven innocent. But I'm not one that will just jump in your lap and be your bestie. I'm still a little people shy. But when I was a kid, I was very people shy, but I would go upstairs and I'd just escape to faraway lands and families and peace and happiness through literature. So go figure that I eventually became an English teacher. And I also, every day I would come home from school, change my school clothes, and I didn't want to hang out with that goofy, crazy family. And there was a huge tennis complex built right across the street from where I lived. And this is when tennis was in its heyday, and there was this huge 16-court big tennis sports complex. So I would change my clothes at 9 years old and run across the street, and I'd just hang out out there until it was time to come home. And I'd be a ball girl, and I'd run back and forth when the players were playing, and I'd throw the balls back to them, and they'd tip me some quarters or dimes, and I'd have money in my pocket. And again, this is, you know, I'm like, I was born in 1959, so I was like 9 years old. This is like in 1968. I was just a kid, but tennis was a really big deal. Anyway, one day this old tennis pro, a very famous tennis player, had retired, and they put him in charge of the sport complex. And he saw me fooling around with a racket and a ball, and he really saw that I had a propensity for hand-eye coordination. And he just saw this gooky little kid, like from 9 years old, every day hanging out there and throwing the tennis balls. And he took me on and he started to coach me. And he coached me for 6 years, and by the time I was 15 years old, and now facing going into my 4th foster home, I was ranked 23 in the state of California as an upcoming tennis amateur, and the goal was always on my 16th birthday, the summer after my 16th birthday, I was going to try out for the junior pro circuit. I was like number 3 seed, so I knew I was going to get on the circuit, and that was going to be my ticket away from this goofy family. But now I'm 15, and they're going to put me in a foster home. So I asked the counselor if I could use the bathroom, and she said yes, and I just went down the hall, and I hiked the fence, and I dropped out of high school at 15 and became a 15-year-old runaway. Eventually, that tennis coach located me, and he said, Tammy, I have invested 6 years in your training, and I have a condominium with an extra bedroom. I know you're afraid to go to a foster home by yourself. Come stay with me, and I will go to the courts, and we will face the courts together, and I'll make sure you find a safe place to live where you could still train. So I moved in with him. He was 40. I was 15. For obvious reasons, I was a very precocious, sexualized 15-year-old. Sadly to say, he fell to the temptation, and I just became his live-in girlfriend, and I never did make it back to school. He had 2 children from a previous marriage. By no means, looking back, do I believe he was an alcoholic. But he was a heavy drinker, and he'd have these 2 kids come and visit him on the weekends from his ex-wife. They were divorced. And one afternoon, we got into tequila, and I call it tequila if you're an alcoholic of my type. And I went into a blackout, and I acted like the crazy, wild person that I do, because like the book says, I'm never mildly intoxicated. I become insanely drunk. And those little kids went home, and they told their mom about this crazy woman their daddy is living with. Now, she had no idea I was 15, or she would have reported him and he'd gone to jail. But she told him, your children will no longer come and visit you as long as that woman is living there. So at 15 years old, a clear gold liquid called tequila has already jeopardized her right to a free weekend, the kids' right to see their dad, his right to be with their kids. And he's got this huge albatross around his neck, and he's kind of in a real pickle because I've been living there and I'm 15, and he doesn't know what to do with me. So because I was a really, really good reader, he comes up with this brilliant idea for me to take the GED exam. And because I'm a good reader, I'm a really good test taker. And this certainly wasn't an idea that originated in my head, but you know how it is, ladies, we're living with the flavor of the month, and they're paying our bills and our rent, so I'm like, okay. So I sign up, and I take this test, and it was like a 5-hour test. And the GED exam, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's like a battery of 5 subcategories, like history, English, math. And if you pass a certain score in each of the 5 categories, it's actually equivalent to having a high school diploma. So 1 week after my 16th birthday, I take this GED exam, and several months later, we receive notification that indeed I passed it. And now I have a high school diploma. I'm 16 years old. I'm living with a 40-year-old man. And he gets this brilliant idea that he takes me over. The minute we got that notification, he'd already had a plan. He took me down to a local community college, and it turns out his friend was the coach of the tennis team. So he has me try out for his friend's tennis team, and at 16 years old, I was good enough to play number 2 varsity string. And then he walked me like right over to admissions and records and enrolled me in 12 units with the hope that I would be traveling with the team all weekend, and I'd be in school all week, and I'd kind of get out of his hair because I'm causing problems. So I did exactly what they describe in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It tells us that many of us have special skills, aptitudes, and abilities, that we not only can build a bright outlook for ourselves, but we can build one for our loved ones, and then we pull the whole thing down over our head with a senseless series of sprees. But I don't understand that because I don't know what an alcoholic is. So I do what many of the women that I've sponsored, I notice, do, is I do the 0 to Mach 5. And it says in the book, many of us swear off alcohol with or without a solemn oath. Well, I'm a solemn oath kind of swearing offer, and I'm like, I'm never going to drink alcohol again. And I make this decision that I'm going to go back to being athletic, academic Tami. Because, see, school has always been a really good arena for me. And school is not normally an arena we tend to migrate toward. It's a tremendous amount of discipline and structure over a really, really elongated period of time with little or no instant gratification until way down the road. And we kind of always want to feel good yesterday, right? But school for me was always the modicum of safety. That was the place where I was thriving. So I decided I'm going to go back to being athletic and academic Tami. And what I didn't realize is I have always tried to reinvent myself and change the outsides in the hope that it will temper these crazy, crazy little insides. And see, I hadn't read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't know that I actually suffer from a spiritual malady. I'm a spiritually maladjusted human being. I have a spirit, and mine is misaligned. It's maladjusted. So I'm always trying to fix the outsides, but I'm never working on the inside. So I go off to this school, and I do what I do. I sign up for 12 units, and for the next 2 years, I went to the local beauty supply and I bought expensive emollients and conditioners for my hair, and I went to the local the local health food store, and I wanted brown rice and yogurt and kashi for breakfast, and I took those 12 units and I could not get a B. I had to get an A, and for 2 years I'm like playing tennis and shaving my legs and painting my toenails and winning, athletic awards and making straight A's, and I'm on the dean's list all 4 semesters, because that's the kind of discipline and structure I have to impose upon my outsides to keep bad girl Tami away, because I'm always trying to outrun her, and she keeps catching up. Now, 2 times from 16 to 18, literally 2 times, I drank. And because I'm an alcoholic that's never mildly intoxicated, both times I drank and got arrested for public drunkenness. And they arrest me, and I'm underage, I'm under 18, and because I'm a pumpkin kid and I got the pumpkin folder, they put me in one of those adolescent lockdown facilities, and the big pink elephant in the room is they're walking me in there, and I'm trying to fight cops and cuss them like a drunken sailor, but within 24 hours of sobering up, they get that orange folder, and immediately they see my childhood history, and my diagnosis always changed to mental and emotional disorders, trauma due to childhood, and post-traumatic stress syndrome. And those doctors always treated my symptoms of depression, of anxiety, because I don't seem to be able to live life on life's terms, and of insomnia, because I was a terrible insomniac. Which, by the way, depression, anxiety, and insomnia are classic symptoms of acute alcoholism. And I made the mistake of doing what so many people do. I kept going to the medical model to find a solution for a spiritual malady. And many of us go to psychiatrists to help for the way we think, and we go to doctors to get medications to physically feel better. But in the book, my favorite line says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, the mental and the physical straighten out. But I keep trying to straighten out the mental and the physical, and that spiritual malady is running rampant. But I don't know to ask for spiritual help. I don't know that I'm suffering from a spiritual malady. So I go off to the school, and I'm doing that, and both times that I drank, I was in a lockdown facility, and both times those doctors treated me with the medical model, and nothing ever got better. At 18 years old, I graduated Pierce College, and I received something called the Chancellor's Award, where a few department heads picked some students that demonstrated some type of athletic and or academic excellence. And now I'm only 18 years old, and I've got a 2-year college degree, and I'm given what's called the Chancellor's Award, which afforded me an opportunity to go to any one of 5 state universities in California. I could pick any one of the 5. They gave me the list. And all I had to do was take 12 units or more, play on their tennis team, and they were going to pay my tuition, my housing, my textbook, and my living expenses. And all I had to do was the 12 units and play tennis. And guess what I did, guys? I was 18 years old. I was like flippin' exhausted. I knew there was no way that I can impose that discipline and structure that I have to impose upon myself to keep bad girl Tami away. I'd done it for 2 years. I was too good for too long. To heck with it, I quit. And they talk about that in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So I spent the next couple years doing what I do best, which is really bad relationships and drinking, and it started to really progress. Now, back then, if you had blonde hair, blue eyes, tan skin, and a really good tennis game, there's a place in California called Marina Del Rey, and it's a really good place to live. So I go down there, and I'm all 5'1.5". with my tennis racket and my blonde hair and my blue eyes, and I meet all these rich men, and they're like, oh, who's this little punky blonde? And then they saw what a good tennis game I had, so I thrived down there. Now, of course, I was living with that guy, Dennis, who's still paying my rent, and I would cheat on him, and he'd throw me out, and we'd make up, and we'd break up, and that craziness that we live in relationships when we're not sober. And anyway, one day I get picked up for a felony drunk driving, and of course I'm put in jail like overnight, and I call Dennis, and of course he bails me out and he picks me up, and I go home and I swear off alcohol with a solemn oath, I'm never going to drink again, and I decide I'm going to go back to being athletic, academic Tami, because that's when I can outrun this bad girl Tami and keep her at bay. So I decide this time maybe the 12 units wasn't enough, I'm going to go for 15, just to keep me in check, right? And the tennis career is kind of over now, because now I'm in my mid-20s, and if you haven't made it by 16 in tennis, you're a wash. So I decide this time I'm going to become a triathlete. So I get a mountain bike, and I'm riding a bike, and I'm swimming laps, and I'm buying brown rice and yogurt and kashi for breakfast, and I got expensive emollients and conditioners for my hair, and I'm going off to school, and I'm shaving my legs, and I'm painting my toenails, and I'm lifting weights and swimming, and doing the same thing now several years later, expecting different results. And during this time, there was a condominium unit right next to Dennis and mine. One wall separated ours from this other unit. And this guy moves in, this tall, handsome guy. He's a doctor. He's an OBGYN. And as he's moving in, he's wearing a triathlete shirt. So I sidle over to him, and I said, hi, I'm Tami. I'm your neighbor. Are you a triathlete? And he said, yeah. And he said, I'm moving here. I just got out of a long 10-year divorce. And I'm like, ding, 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 and the fact I live with another guy, that's just an incidental, right? You know how we roll. And I start sidling up to him, and I could tell right away he was interested. And poor Rick met me in a swearing off period because I was academic, athletic, Tami. And he became very enamored with me. And by the very next day of him moving in, he said to me, I'm a triathlete and I need to train. Is there a gym around here? And at 6 in the morning, we run a couple miles together, and then I take him to my gym and I sign him up for my gym, and he's spotting me with weights. And then Wednesday that same week, he had his afternoons off his medical practice, and he's laying out by the pool with me, helping me with my microbiology homework because he's a physician and went to med school. And of course, Dennis is working hard and paying the rent. You know how that is, right? And Rick, really, I could tell there was something going on, right? We're not stupid. But one night, Dennis and I got into some kamikazes, and we got into one of those knockdown, drag-out fights that we can get into that became physically violent. And I do not condone any kind of domestic violence, but I can tell you that I was not a victim of domestic violence. I think the guys that were with me were. I may be only 5'1.5", but they used to call me Tami Tyson, because when I'm drunk, I like to beat people up, I guess. And we're getting in this knockdown, drag-out fight, and that neighbor Rick hears the fight, and he calls the police to Dennis and my condominium unit. And I see Dennis talking to the police, and Rick is standing behind the police going, is Tami okay? Is Tami okay? And I'm inside, just drunk. And Dennis gets rid of the neighbor, and he gets rid of the police, and then Dennis comes, and, we go upstairs and do one of those passionate all-night makeups, the way we do after the police are called for us beating the crap out of each other, oh, baby, you're my soulmate, I love you, because we're so dramatic, right? And we profess our love to each other like a bad Hallmark card all night. And the next morning, I think nothing of waking up, taking a little liquid makeup, covering up the black eyes, the bruises, and the choke marks from the fight the night before, putting a backpack on my back, and going off to Cal State University Northridge like there's nothing wrong with my life. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm in the underground parking of that condominium complex, and I'm getting out of my car and walking toward the elevator, and my jaw is tight, my back is rigid, I'm restless, I'm irritable, I'm discontented. I'd been drinking the night before, so I'm hungover. I'd been beaten the night before, so my whole body physically hurts. I hadn't slept all night because we professed our love to each other like a Hallmark card. And I'd been sitting in classes all day. And life just hurt. And I'm walking toward the elevator, and a thought occurs to me. There's a huge bottle of vodka waiting for me upstairs. And the vodka looked no more or less innocuous than the water in this bottle. Now, I hadn't seen the vodka, I hadn't smelled the vodka, I certainly hadn't tasted the vodka, but thinking about that bottle of vodka, my jaw loosens up, I start to relax and walk a little better, my entire mood elevates. And if you identify with that, you're probably an alcoholic, because clear liquids just do not have that kind of power just thinking about them over normal people. And I'm pretty sure it was Brian, one of our speakers, alluded to that, right? So I get in the elevator, and I know liquid relief is a-coming, and I go to push the closed door button, and this hand wedges between the doors, and it's Dr. Rick right at the elevator doors, and he goes, "You and I need to talk about what happened last night." And I'm like pushing the closed door button, and he walks in. And prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and having a good sponsor like Clancy, or my husband Patrick has 37 years of sobriety now, but Patrick knew me when I was new. And I really want to take the time to thank all you gentle, gentle men that allowed us women to get sober in our first year. Because I used to try to pick up on you guys, hit on you. I'd come with my little tops and my Daisy Duke shorts. And I want to thank you men that could see beyond that charade and just allowed me to be a broken little girl that I was. And so I walked in, but I used to use a tremendous amount of inappropriate sexual attire, sexual humor, sexual body language, and a tremendous amount of foul language to keep especially you men like a little off guard with me, so you could never just look me in the eye and have an adult conversation. So I turned to Rick and he said, "Tami, we need to talk about what happened yesterday." And I'm like, "You effing know what happened yesterday. You're the one that called like the effing cops, and I don't want to effing talk about it." And instead of going like, "Whoa, okay," he just gently put his hands on my shoulders and he looked at me. And that really disarmed me. So I realized, like, okay, the tough bratitude thing isn't going to put him off his game. And he's a surgeon, and he had a beautiful silk suit, silk Fastenal tie and a beautiful suit. He was always impeccably dressed. And I just grabbed his tie and I yanked his nose, his neck right into my nose, and I smelled him and I said, "My God, you smell so delicious." And he stepped back and he just took my chin so I couldn't wiggle away. And he looked right down into my eyes with those beautiful brown eyes of his, and he said, "Tami," he said, "you're such an engaging, beautiful, talented young woman, and I could see you're really struggling with something, and I want to help you, but I don't know what's wrong with you." And man, that's like the worst thing you can hear when you're an alcoholic suffering from alcoholism, because I have always known there was something wrong with me. I've now had 10 years of therapy and inpatient and all those lockdown adolescent facilities to tell me that I am not wired right due to the length and severity of the abuse I faced at the hand of my father from 5 to 15 years old. And my job now in my 20s is to just pretend I'm okay so you guys don't know I'm damaged goods. And I think I'm doing a good job of fooling you all, and another person hits me right between the eyes with the truth. But like the book tells me, I am now at the point in my alcoholism that I'm constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself about the role that alcohol plays in my life and the role I'm playing in the lives of other people. But for whatever reason, and today I do believe it was the grace of God, I got off that elevator, I went into his condominium unit, and I told Rick the cry of every drinking alcoholic. I told him about my dad, I told him about the foster homes, I told him about the abuse, and I said, one day I'm going to finish my education. And one day when I finish my education, I'm going to have my own job. And one day when I have my own job, I'm not going to live with abusive men. And one day, and one day, and one day. Because the cry of every drinking alcoholic is, look, I know my life's a little whack, but I have a plan. And when my plan comes to fruition, it's going to all be okay. And if you're new in this room and you have a plan, it's never a good plan. And that's why we must be sponsored, because the same mind and thinking that got you into Alcoholics Anonymous is not going to help you to get sober. But I broke down and I cried for the first time in 23 years. That I cried for the first time, and I cried tears that I had needed to cry for a really long time. And I was no more, seductress Tami. I was no more arrogant, fake, confident Tami. I was no more cussing street girl Tami. I actually just broke down and I cried like the little broken girl I was and always had been. And he actually held me and I let him hold me. And I can still say by far, I'll be 59 years old this year, and that was the first time I had ever experienced any real intimacy. And I want you ladies to know that the most intimate moments I've had in the 25 years of Alcoholics Anonymous have not been between the sheets. But I didn't understand that when I came in. And I went next door that night, and I never did get that drink of vodka, and I actually slept for the first time in a long time without drinking. But I woke up the next morning, and I felt the fear they talk about in this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that fear that comes in 100 different forms. Because another human being saw the broken truth about Tami, and I'm constitutionally incapable of being able to handle that truth. And I did the only thing an alcoholic knows how to do when they feel that fear. And they don't have a God that they can pray to for strength. And they don't have friends like Carla that they can pick up the phone and just talk those dumb alcoholic women fears through with. And I did the only thing I knew that took away the big ow, and I found that bottle of vodka, and I poured myself a drink at 9 o'clock in the morning. Once that alcohol took effect and it heated up my chest, one more time I came up with a plan. And my plan was that I'd now been with Dennis for going on 9 years, and things weren't going really well. And that rich surgeon doctor next door seemed to really have a crush on me, regardless of what I keep putting in front of his face. And I had the key to his condominium unit because I used to take care of his exotic plants and fish when he would travel to medical conferences. And my plan that morning at 9 a.m. was to just take all my stuff out of Dennis's unit and move it right next door into Rick's and get Rick between the sheets, because I had to replace the broken image I saw of me in his eyes the night before, and I had to get rid of that pity I saw he looked at me with and replace it with Tami, the sexual goddess. So I spent the day drunk moving, and are there any Al-Anons in the room tonight? Al-Anons, where are you? Okay, you guys will get this, they won't. Dennis came home, and there I weren't after 9 years, and Rick came home, and there I were. And Al-Anons, Rick not only let me stay, but 3 weeks later, he walked me down the aisle and he said, "I do." And the day that Rick said, "I do," was the day that he qualified for Al-Anon, because his life was not the same for a really, really long period of time. And look, it's taken me a long time to be able to say this from the podium, but I punished Rick for everything my father had ever done to me. I punished Rick for a crime that he never even committed. And because he was pre-Al-Anon and pre a program of recovery for himself, he sadly took the butt kicking, and I darn near destroyed his soul. You know, Rick grew up in an extremely abusive, alcoholic home. He went through a really difficult, challenging 10-year marriage. Rick also escaped his painful childhood like I did through academia. He was so academically talented that he made it to high school at 12. He made it to college at 16. He made it to medical school at 20. And at 24 years old, my ex-husband was an air flight surgeon at the tail end of the Vietnam War. He was 24 years old. Think about it for some of you that have kids. And he's overseas in that war, sewing those boys' bodies back when they were being medevaced off the fields, blown apart. And he survived all of that, and yet after just a couple of years of being married to me, he was stuttering and stammering, and he didn't even know his own name, because I'm not a funny drunk. And I emasculated him, and I humiliated him, because he truly loved me, and I could not tolerate that kind of love. It was too threatening. But that marriage did produce 2 children, and today I have a daughter, Chelsea, that's 31. It's weird to say that. Some of these guys have seen my kids grow up in AA rooms since they were little, but Chelsea's 21, and my son Alex is 30. And through the grace of God, I could not drink alcohol the entire time with my pregnancies. I had a condition called hyperemesis, where I couldn't stand the smell of coffee, of perfume. I puked all 9 months with both my kids, and I did not pick up a drink. But I wake up one morning, and I'm now married to a surgeon. We have a 4,000 square foot home in Chatsworth with a 4-car garage and a beautiful pool and yard. And I got this beautiful 1-year-old baby girl, and I have this beautiful 4-week-old baby boy. And I'm struck sober, and I haven't had a drink in 2 years, with this crippling thought that I have 2 living human beings looking at me for something, and I am a completely crippled human being myself. And I did the only thing I know how to do when I feel that fear. And I drove down to the liquor store that morning and I picked up a drink. And the book of Alcoholics Anonymous says many women in particular cross beyond recognition in a short period of time, and that was certainly my story. And I got so dangerous that my pre-Al-Anon husband decides to hire a full-time housekeeper to move in and take care of me because I'm drinking and driving with the kids. He's sending our 2 little small infant children out to full-time daycare, and he's working the hours that he works as an OB/GYN. So I don't work, I don't go to school, I have someone taking care of me, someone taking care of my home, someone taking care of my bills, and someone taking care of my kids. And that's suicide if you're an alcoholic of my type. And I started to spiral down, and I remember one afternoon, I'm drunk in the morning, and we had a pool. We have like a 3-story chalet-style house, and I'm in the middle level looking down at the pool, and I decided in my drunken stupor, I want to get a tan, but I figured that the roof is closer to the sun than the pool. So I grease myself up with baby oil, and I take my little bikini, and I get some extension ladder with a tumbler of vodka, and I climb up to the roof of this 3rd-story chalet roof that we have, and I lay out my little towel, and I'm laying on the roof greased up with baby oil and my tumbler. And Rick used to drop the kids off to school, daycare school, like in the mornings, and then he'd pick them up midday at 12 noon and bring them home to the housekeeper. And as they pull into our cul-de-sac, there's Mom, wild and drunk, on my bikini. And Rick parked the car in the garage, and he had Chelsea on one side and Alex on the other, and they were like 3 and 4 years old. And he looked up at me, and I literally just walked to the edge of the roof, and I jumped off onto his head, and I'm digging my nails in his head, and the kids are screaming, and the neighbors come out. And the very next day, he found a group of people called Al-Anon. I am not an Al-Anon, and I do not go to Al-Anon, but I have a tremendous respect for Al-Anon because they took away my greatest enabler, and they gave my children a husband, and they gave my children a father and gave me a husband. But God, I hated you Al-Anons while I was drinking. And he starts going to these Al-Anons, and like any good alcoholic, I have to put down anything that's threatening my control. And I go, you're going to go to let's all feel sorry for Dr. Rick Harum, and you're going to cry about your miserable wife, and they're going to dance around you and say, poor Dr. Rick. And he just goes to these meetings, and one day he comes home, and I had been drinking, and he said, Tami, you can go to a hell in a handbasket, but you're not going to take Chelsea and Alex and I with you anymore. And I knew those Al-Anons were giving him a backbone to stand up to the insidious insanity of my alcoholism, and I felt the fear they talked about in this book. So I picked a fight with him, and I got in my car, and I went down to the liquor store, and I got up on the 118 freeway out where I live in Los Angeles, and I cranked down the windows, and I blasted my radio, and I let the wind through my hair, and I saw a call box on the side of the freeway. And in my drunken stupor, I thought it was a telephone, booth, and I'm like, I'm going to make a phone call. And I plow my car into this call box, and 30 days later, I'm standing in front of a woman judge. Now, what I failed to mention is when my daughter was 4, they put me in yet another one of those multi-specialty family groups, where everybody sits in a circle, and my family all shows up, and we talk about my pain. And I guess my family was just over it, and they all decided they weren't going to show up one day. So I went home because it was outpatient, and I had a bottle of antidepressants, and I took the whole bottle of antidepressants to get attention. And then my head started to float off, and my heart started to palpitate, and I got scared because I really didn't want to die. I just wanted to scare them. And I called 911, and I gave the phone to my 4-year-old daughter to call the paramedics. And they showed up, and they put me in a lockdown facility for 42 days on that attempted suicide. And now I'm standing in front of a woman judge, and she's reading my rap sheet, and she says, Tami, you're not going to get out of jail. You're going to serve some time on this. However, I'm going to put you in a lockdown facility for 30 days for alcoholism before your jail time. And I now go to my 4th lockdown facility. And when I'm in that facility, I told those doctors what I've been telling them since I was 16 years old, and I first started appearing. And I said, look, I told them what I drank, and I told them how I felt, and they said, Tami, you are self-medicating through alcohol, and none of this is your fault, and the best hope for you is the right combination of medical management to treat your depression and anxiety so you no longer have to drink alcohol, but none of this is your fault. Later, when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, old-timers like Clancy had a new name for the effect, new name for a mother who attempted to take her own life in front of her 2 children without giving a crap how it would affect those kids. He called it alcoholism, selfishness, self-centeredness. The world kept revolving around my childhood pain. Forget I have 2 kids in their childhood now. It's all about me. In that lockdown facility, I told those doctors about my drinking, and they said that none of this was my fault. And I told them, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd go downstairs and I'd see broken glass, broken children, a broken husband, a broken home. I'd just go back up the stairs, turn the heating blanket up to Mom, suck my thumb and think of ways to kill myself. And that's when they told me, that you're a selfish, self-centered person because you're going on and on about your childhood. I used to tell those doctors in that lockdown facility that I'd go to the local gym in my swearing off periods, work out with all you men, of course. And then I'd take all you men up to the pub, buy drinks on the house. I was playing big shot with money I didn't even earn. And in that lockdown facility, they told me taking my husband's money to buy acceptance from men was really my way indirectly of buying the love I'd been so poorly robbed of from my father. So none of those actions were my fault. Later, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for a buck in a basket, guys like Don had a new name for that behavior, too. They called it stealing. And not only did I steal my husband's money and play big shot on his dime, but as a wife and a mother of 2 small children, I used to take men to those daytime motels that I met at the gym. And let's just say I did what drunken alcoholic women do in those daytime motels. And I'm the wife of a pretty prominent surgeon in our community, and I'm a mother of 2 small children. And in that lockdown facility, those doctors told me that my dad had given me a script when I was 5 years old, that my only worth was my sexuality. So all I was doing in those hotel rooms was acting out a script I'd been so poorly given in my childhood, but none of those actions in those daytime motel rooms were my responsibility. Later, when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor Clancy had a new name for that too. He called it cheating. By the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, my mother and husband had put me in 4 lockdown facilities from the age of 16 until 32. Never once was it for the diagnosis of alcoholism, and for a buck in a basket, the old-timers in AA said, "No, kid, you're a liar, you're a cheat, you're a thief, and you're probably just an alcoholic suffering from alcoholism." And God, I needed it to be so much more. Young people in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a universal truth in these rooms that they don't tell you in this book. You don't like these old-timers, and you don't respect these old-timers, don't worry about it. You're never going to be one, I am so grateful that the men and the women, and I want to reiterate, women like Carla, and there's so many women that taught me how to be a lady, dress like a lady, clean up my language, clean up the way I dress, don't promote myself sexually. I also want to let you know that we're a fellowship of men and women, and there's many of these gentle men taught me how to be a wife and a mother. And you know what? I am so grateful to the mentors that did not give a crap about how I felt, but they cared about how I acted. And it is not easy to do. I took it for granted when I was new, but I'll tell you something. Now that I sponsor a lot of people, it's really hard to put in a 14-hour day, and I'm taking care of my mom in hospice, and I have a lot of family members we're caring for right now, and then some newcomer calls you up, and they're talking out the side of their neck, and you have to kind of straighten them out, and then they hate you, and then they go to the home group, and they sit in the brat pack with all the other newcomers, and they whisper about you, and then you don't even want to go to your home group anymore, and you know what? It's not an easy deal. But I owe them that because that's what they gave to me. Anyway, the condition of my getting out of that lockdown facility is I have to start attending AA meetings. I come to meetings late. I leave meetings early. I wear low-cut tops and these little Daisy Duke shorts. I was a lot younger then. And I took 5 of those 30-day chips. But I'll never forget my last surrender because I stood at a podium like this and I told you all about God and Alcoholics Anonymous and how wonderful my life was. But what I didn't tell you is Al-Anon had rightly convinced my husband that if I kill my kids driving drunk in a car, that he is not 50% responsible. The Al-Anons in LA don't play, and they told him, "Rick, you're going to be 100% responsible because Tami is incapable of making a sober decision for those innocent minor children. And they said, you have put her in rehabs, lockdown facilities. I've had the best doctors that money could buy. She's in and out of AA. And Rick tried to evict me through the courts, and I created such a scene in the medical community and caused him so many problems that one night Rick just kidnapped the kids, and he moved out, and he was living in an undisclosed place. But see, I didn't tell anybody in AA because I was enjoying the break I was getting from my marriage and from being with my kids. And I stood at that podium, and I took my chip, and what I forgot to tell them is that I hadn't seen my own children and husband in 67 days. That's 2 weeks, that's 2 months and a week. I got down off the podium, and this mean old timer, Cowboy Nick, came out, and he said, kid, you have a phone call. And I went into the clubhouse, and it was Rick. And he said, Tami, are you sober? And with the arrogance of an alcoholic, I said, yeah, Rick, I'm sober. In fact, hey, I just taken another 30-day chip. He said, Tami, Alex turned 5 3 weeks ago. And I was enjoying the attention I was getting from the men in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd forgotten Alex's 5th birthday. And he said, Tami, Alex is having night terrors every night, and I've had to take our little 5-year-old to a pediatric psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist told me to sign him up for T-ball to get his little mind off his troubles. He said, your daughter, Chelsea, can't even make it through a half a day of kindergarten without going to the nurse's office with a stomach ache, and every night she cries for you. So as much as I don't want to see you, woman, he said, today is Alex's first little T-ball game, and I don't want to see you, but I think it would be good for the kids to see you if you're sober. And I got the directions, and I go to this little league field, and there's my husband working the hours that he works with another man from Al-Anon, and he was wearing a team uniform, and he was the assistant coach of Alex's team, because I was enjoying the attention I was getting from the men in Alcoholics Anonymous. And my little daughter, Chelsea, had this beautiful little pinafore sundress, and her hair was back in a French braid. And I later learned that the women from Al-Anon were going to Rick's condominium where he had rented, and they were doing their little kindergarten homework and doing their little lunches because I was busy getting attention from the men in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I looked at my family, and I just walked away, and I found this guy with a big cooler of beer, and my family never saw me that day at that Little League field, and I picked up a beer from him. 3 days later, I came to 45 minutes from my home down in Inglewood near the LAX airport, and I'm in a woman's kitchen with an ice pack on the side of my face, and she's got my wallet, and she's giving my husband Rick directions to pick me up for the last time. Rick got in the car, and it seemed like forever before he broke the silence, but he said, Tami, you've been on a 3-day run. Your mother, your sister, and I were in family court this morning at 11:30 a.m., and this is a restraining order that says that you cannot come within 100 yards of me, of my medical practice. I've moved the children back home on this last run of yours. You cannot come near the kids' daycare, their school, or our home, and your mom and I have temporary custody of your children, and you need to go. And I said, Rick, where am I going to go? And he said, I don't know, Tami. Why don't you go call one of your AA bimboy boyfriends? He pulled up in front of our house, and he turned off the engine, and he said, Tami, I will send you money every month, and I will send you all your stuff once you find a permanent place to live. But please just find a place to stay tonight, and for God's sakes, just leave me and the kids alone. And I went up in my bedroom, and I got a gym bag, and I threw some sweats and some T-shirts in my gym bag. And as I walked, and I really want you to know, I was literally spiritually dead. I remember my body moving, and I remember buzzing in my ears, but I was really void of, there was no fight. There was no fight. And I walked out of our bedroom, and Rick was just leaning against the door, and I just said, Rick, I know I need to go, and I wanted to go. I wanted to go. I knew I was hurting them. I was so tired. And I said, but could I just please say goodbye to my kids before I go? And he said, Tami, your kids have been through hell and back. They're asleep in their rooms. You can look in on your children, but for once in your life, woman, don't wake up your children. And I want you to know that that was on April 23rd of 1993. And I stood outside Alex's room, and as I opened the door, the hall light went right down onto my son, Alex. And I'm always really ashamed to admit this, but I saw my son for the first time the way a mother is supposed to see her child. And he was 5. And I really saw him for the first time. And I looked at him, and he looked exactly like his dad. He looked so beautiful, and he looked so little in that bunk bed. And I was literally mesmerized by his aliveness and his vulnerability. And I just remember walking toward him, and I sat down on the bed, and I reeked of alcohol. I'd been drinking for 3 days. And he opened up his eyes, and he started to stroke the inside of my hand. And my little boy asked me a question that all you well-meaning people in AA, every psychiatrist, my mom, my husband, and my little boy looked at me, and he said, "Mama," he said, "when are you going to come home and not go away anymore?" And in that instant, I became willing to do whatever it took. I never wanted to drink alcohol again. And I know it like I'm standing here tonight. It wasn't my father. It wasn't my childhood. It wasn't the abuse. It wasn't the foster homes. My sister went through all of that too. She went to college and graduated and got a big marriage and a big house, and I became an idiot. Because my sister doesn't suffer from alcoholism. And everything that was going wrong in my life was over a clear liquid called vodka. And for God's sakes, if you're in this room tonight and you have grandparents or parents or a brother or a sister or a husband or a wife, or for God's sakes, a child that has cried not 100 times, that has cried more than 2 times over your drinking or using, then like me, and like this book tells you, you're a selfish, self-centered human being. There's no shame in being an alcoholic. None of us wanted this thing. The shame is that you got a room full of what, like, I don't know how many thousand people here, 1,200 people here tonight, and a book, and all these old-timers, man, that will tell you you never have to drink again if you don't want to. And even if you do want to, they will show you how not to do it. And the shame is when you don't take the help. And for whatever reason, alcohol, not my mommy, not my daddy, not my sponsor, not my psychiatrist, alcohol beat me into the willingness to finally surrender. And I asked the God that I didn't even believe in that night on my son's floor to please help me, and I have not picked up a drink since. Look, in my first year of sobriety, the AA bug bit me tight. I had lost custody of my children. I got sober on an old-timer's couch. And here I had a 4,000 square foot home. And even at 8 months of the sobriety, through the grace of God, I received custody back of my children. And that old goat wouldn't let me go home until I had a year. And I wanted so bad to get in the big bed. At 1 year of sobriety, my little daughter, my son, and my husband were on the other side of that one candle. And I had told you all year that I believed in God, and I raised my hand and told you I was an alcoholic. But when I saw my kids and my husband give me that 1 year cake, I knew that there was a God that day, His amazing grace. I'd gone 365 days without a drink of alcohol. Through the grace of God and Al-Anon, my husband decided to come home and give me a shot at being a mother, a sober mother to those kids. And I'll tell you, he's a bigger man than I ever would have been a woman. Because down the road later, when he cheated on me, I couldn't hang and I left the marriage. But I had cheated on him, I had humiliated him, and he gave me the right to raise those children as a married wife in that home for the next 12 years. At 1 year of sobriety, I looked at my sponsor and I said, I got a year sober, I'm going back to school, and I just signed up for 12 units, and he's like, good asshole, now go drop 11 of them. Go drop 8 of them. He said, Tammy, he goes, you can do anything you want to do in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, but you have to do it sober. And meeting makers make it. And he said, you will never call me up and say I have to miss a meeting because of finals or school. So he said, you can go to school, kid, but we can't do things like other people. We have to always schedule our meetings and our life around it. We don't schedule our life and then our meetings around our life. And so I had to go to school 4 units, 6 units, I think the most he ever let me take after like 18 years of school. And I stand before you, I was a high school dropout, and I not only have 1 master's degree, I actually have 2 master's degrees. And Clancy always says I'm educated way beyond my intelligence. But you know, but I never missed a meeting. And you know what I do for a living? I teach your kids, I teach your grandkids, I teach English language arts, and I came in here cussing like a drunken sailor, and if that's not a sobering thought, it should be. And I love it. I got to walk through a lot of blessings in sobriety. I was able to be a sober mom to that kid, and the maternal bug bit me hard. And I was Girl Scout mom and gymnastics mom, and I just, my sponsees always tell me I ripped my kids off a mom, and I also say, man, you ripped yourself off, because being a mother has been the greatest for me, the greatest gift of all. And I was able to go get those degrees, and Rick made a fatal Al-Anon mistake. When I had 9 years sober, Rick realized he had a wife that worked, and contributed to the family income. He had a wife that was sober and very active in AA. He had a wife that was really there and put those children first. And he thought all the problems that he had a wife that was committed to her fidelity and commitment to her marriage, and he thought his problem was solved, and he quit going to Al-Anon meetings when I had 9 years sober. When I had 12 years of sobriety, Rick came home and he said, Tami, I've met another woman. She's younger than you, she's prettier than you, and she's a whole lot more fun than you. And I thought I was going to die. And he said, and I'm going to leave you for her. And I remember I went to Clancy, and Rick bought the best attorneys that money could buy, so I had to go get an attorney, and this spiritual peace that I had known for 12 years was shattered, and my whole story from the podium was, I lost my kids, and I lost my husband, and he went to Al-Anon, and I went to AA, and we lived happily ever after. And during this time, my daughter's being treated for depression. My son I had to send to a lockdown facility in Utah to get him away from the people and the drugs he's killing himself with, and my husband leaves me for another woman. And at 12 years of sobriety, I feel like a complete failure as a wife, a mother, and an AA. And Clancy told me, Tami, you're losing a lot of weight, what's going on? And I told him, and he said, kid, what are you going after? And we had properties in the medical practice in the house, and I said, I'm going after spousal support. And he said, really, Tam? He goes, what's spousal support? I said, that's where you're married to like a surgeon for 21 years? And then he leaves you for another woman, and my attorney tells me I'm entitled. By the way, don't ever tell your sponsor what you're entitled to. Especially if his name's Clancy. And I said, and the attorneys tell me that I'm entitled to $4,800 a month, which is the half-life of the marriage for 11 years, and half his medical practice, and his practice made $1 million a year. And Clancy said, Tami, I don't really give a crap what you're entitled to from the attorneys. He said, that man put up with your drinking. He put up with your sobriety. He put you through school so that you could be self-supporting through your own contributions. He allowed you to come back and be a sober mom in that home after all you put him through. And you're not a goddamn doctor, so what the hell do you want with a medical practice? And I go, well, what do I do? And he said, Tami, why don't you go ask Rick what he wants? And I went to Rick, and the minute Clancy said that, it felt good. And I went to Rick, and I said, Rick, what is it you want? And he said, Tami, I want my medical practice, and I just want my new girlfriend. And he said, what do you want? And I said, Rick, I just want the house. I want to keep the house because I don't want to uproot the kids. I already drank away the first 5 and 6 years of their life. And we went to an arbitrator, and for $3,500, and they said our divorce was going to be well over $100,000 because of the vacation homes and stuff. I kept the house, he kept his medical practice, no money changed hands, and we had divorced. And Rick said that he never truly believed that I could really change. And when I did that, he said, Tami, I truly put you in the highest regard of my list of women to admire. And I was like always at the bottom of that list for everybody. And that meant so much to me. Sadly to say, and I know nobody ever believes this, Rick left me for a worse alcoholic than I was. And she was worse because she was vindictive, and she took him for every penny he had. And he and I consoled him through a lot of that. And in 2013, my daughter calls me, and Rick had to end up moving 3 hours away to Fresno and reopen a new medical practice. And I get a call from my daughter, and she said, Daddy's work called, and he hasn't shown up to work for 2 days. My ex-husband has not missed a day of work in 40 years. And I said, something's wrong, but they called her because she was next to kin. I said, Chelsea, tell them to go to his house. I gave them the address. They found the lights on. His car was there. They could hear the TV, and Rick didn't answer the phone. She gave them permission to enter, and they found my ex-husband on the floor. It turns out that he's having the effects of Agent Orange from Vietnam, and he was in full-blood septicemia. and he was barely alive, and they rushed him to the hospital, and Chelsea called Patrick and I, and we got my son Alex, and we went up to Fresno, and the doctors told me that they were keeping him alive on life support just so his kids come and say goodbye to their dad. And I want you to know that Clancy told me, Tami, this is their father. Now you put on your big girl panties and you be there for those children. And I walked my son in and I walked my daughter in, and they said goodbye to their dad. And my daughter was the hardest. He was in a coma and all those machines were breathing for him. And she had been engaged to be married, and she said, Daddy, nobody was supposed to walk me down the aisle except for you. But I kept hearing Clancy said, Tami, you do not wear your emotions on your sleeve and infect your children with it. They need you right now. And I stayed strong. And after Patrick and I had to put on these hazmat suits, and we walked in, and I just asked if I could be with him. I didn't want him to die alone. And because he was a surgeon on staff, they allowed that. And we went in there in our hazmat suits, and I want you to know that I never, ever loved anybody as much as I loved him. And I remember looking at him in that bed, and he looked so familiar to me, and he felt so safe. And I thanked him for saving me in every way that a woman could be saved. And Patrick leaned over and whispered in his ear, and he said, hey, buddy, you take an Emmy and you go on home for a life well lived. And as long as I'm on this earth, I will never let any harm come to your ex-wife or your children, because they kept telling us to give him permission to let go. And we just stood there, and it's like time stopped. And Rick didn't die that night. And the sun came up the next morning, and he didn't die. 15 days later, they pulled him off life support, and he was able to breathe on his own, but they told us he would never walk or talk again. 5 months later, they told us the day before Christmas to come and pick him up. They were going to do an ambulance transport, and I had to find a boarding care facility where he would just stay until the good Lord took him or whatever was going to happen, but at least he was viable with life. And I go looking at these boarding care facilities, and this beautiful man, this triathlete, this accomplished surgeon, this published author, his entire life was going to be reduced to a twin bed and a nightstand. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, the stuff we worry about and the money and the prestige, it means nothing. And I called Clancy and I said, Clancy, what are you doing? None of your options are right. And he said, Tami, you always just do the next indicated thing. And he said, you find him a boarding care facility and you make sure he gets the care he needs until whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And he said, and by the way, kid, just pray and ask God for help. And by the way, go to work. Like, you never miss work with Clancy. So I go to work that morning and I just said, God, please give me the strength and I'll find a boarding care facility. And I came home that afternoon, and my current husband, Patrick, is a contractor, and all his construction trucks were filled up in our cul-de-sac. And Patrick and his guys had come into our house, and they gutted a bedroom downstairs and changed all the floors and ordered a $6,000 hospital bed and pulleys and a special shower. And I looked at him and he said, kid, we take in drunks off the street, man. This is the kid's dad. Let's at least let him spend whatever time he has left here. And we brought Rick home, and through the love of a good ex-wife, Patrick's cooking, really, really good physical, occupational, and all those therapists, I want to let you know that a year later, Rick walked Chelsea down the aisle, and he did the father-daughter dance. And it was really funny because I became like obsessed with his care, and every day I'd make him, he was skin and bones, and I'd make him get out and shave. I said, you are not going to become a professional patient, now you get out of this bed. But we'd put a baby monitor in his room because we're upstairs and we couldn't hear him at night, and we had to call an ambulance several times while he was with us. And Patrick, if you don't know my husband, he's got this strong Irish brogue, and Patrick would go in and check on him every morning, and I'd hear Rick say, Patrick, he goes, man, she's killing me. He goes, you have got to get her to let me take a break from this shower and all this exercise. And Patrick's like, aye, man, you better work hard in your physical therapy because you're going to have to walk out of here in order to escape the woman, and it was really funny. Anyway, I'm just going to end in sharing that I've had a lot of highs and lows. I got to see my daughter graduate UCLA with honors, and she was the keynote speaker at her graduation. And my daughter doesn't cuss like a drunken sailor. And my daughter is a feminine, educated, intelligent, beautiful young woman. My son ended up struggling with addiction, and he has 3 years sober today. And yeah, and He was, he was going to go to medical school like his dad. He's very academically brilliant. And while he was in college, he started posting some really weird things on Facebook. And my daughter and all his high school friends started to call me. And we were really concerned. And we thought, God, is he like on meth? Like, what is going on? And he was an athlete, so he was always one that really took care of himself. And my ex-husband, as a surgeon, called the college and said, you need to do a welfare check on my son. And they found my son on the floor by a toilet in complete psychosis. And we had to put my son, we brought him home and we put him inpatient, and 42 days later, my son, at 26 years old, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I'll tell you, man, I thought I was sucker punched. And 2 weeks after he was diagnosed, and we're visiting him in the hospital, and I'm going to tell you, schizophrenia is a difficult illness. There's no cure. It's a biological brain disorder. It gets worse with time. It can be managed by medications. And I'm going to tell you, I've seen things that no mother should ever see. But Clancy told me that it's happening to him, it's not happening to me, and that I need to be there and be the sober mom that boy with this illness needs. And I'm going to tell you that I've been able to stand up to the task. And this girl shows up at our doorstep, 9 months pregnant, and she tells me that my son is her baby's daddy while he's in a lockdown unit and just got diagnosed schizophrenic. And I'm like, it ain't hell, it's not hot, this is not happening. A paternity test was taken, and apparently he had gone homeless while he was in college, and he impregnated this girl, and this little baby's born. And I want to let you know, for a little girl that couldn't even show up for her own life, my mom is 90 years old, and she's in hospice right now, and she's waiting for us to come home Sunday morning. And we are now, Patrick and I joined NAMI, and we belong to a schizophrenia adult aftercare program. And we went to court, and my husband drank away his son 37 years ago and then got sober. I drank away my 2 children 25 years ago, and I got sober. And if you don't like your script in Alcoholics Anonymous, 3 weeks ago, the state of California awarded Patrick and I, he's 70, I'm 59, and they awarded us custody, and we're going to be raising this little 3-year-old grandson. And he's like the flippin' apple of our eye. And man, he's got Patrick wrapped around. And I couldn't even show up to my own life. And I am taking care of, right now, we are the 2 of the most selfish, self-centered people in the world. We're taking care of my 90-year-old mom. My ex-husband is still living with us. We got my mentally disabled son, who is probably the most courageous person I know, and we're raising this little 3-year-old. I thank God for AA. I thank AA for God, and I really thank all of you for my life. Thank you so much.